I want to build a brand and a business that's like intergenerational and that can stand the test of time. And in order to do that, and I've like read the J. Crew book, and I look at brands like that, like J. Crew and The Gap, who have been through like 100 iterations of themselves. And I think what I realized is like, oh, you're all going to go through, and we will too, go through phases of being like hot and trendy and cool. And then we will not be hot and trendy and cool. And then we will be hot, trendy, and cool again. And that's kind of what you see with these brands that are like so long standing and have been worn by my grandmother the same way they'll be worn by my children, is that they've been able to survive the lulls. And how do you survive the lulls? You have to build your business. Like the math has to math.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the PlayBridge podcast. Today, we are joined by Madeleine Cohen. She is the founder of Nelle Atelier. Madeleine has built a career in brand building and startups, most recently at Bala, Casper, and Estee Lauder. She founded Nelle Atelier because she had a closet full of jeans, but nothing to wear. At 5'1", Madeleine has always had to stand on her toes and imagine what her new jeans would look like hemmed, then spend $50 at the tailor to get them fit. And she isn't alone. Half of women like her are also under 5'4", and they need jeans too. Madeleine and the Nelle Atelier team are reinventing the petite section for the modern shopper, starting with denim. So Madeleine, welcome to the show. This has been a long time coming, and I'm so excited to chat with you today.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, to kick it off, why don't you start by telling us your original vision for Nelle and how you really got started building this business?
Yeah, totally. So in November of 2022, I left my job at Bala, and I was actually going to take a break. I was like, didn't know what exactly I wanted to do, but I had given myself 3 months. I was actually thinking about going into venture capital and being like an operator in residence or something like that, because I felt like I'd spent enough time in startups and I had like something to kind of share and offer. I quickly realized that like I actually had to build my own startup first, before like pontificating on how to operate a startup. But in that realization, basically like 3 weeks into my so-called break, didn't last very long. I was standing in front of my closet. I've always been a shopper. I love fashion. I love brands and I love products. I feel like that's like the one through line of my entire career is just like my love for consumer. And so I had a lot of jeans. I had like 30 or 40 pairs of jeans, and I was looking at them and I was like, wow, I hate all of them. What's up with that? And I was like, okay, like maybe I'll go online and maybe I'll shop petites. Like I've never thought to shop petites. Like it's not something that like brands talk about a lot. And so no joke, I Googled best jeans for short girls and nothing came up. Like my options were super mass market, not exactly premium, which is totally fine, but I wanted something that was more analogous to the other brands in my wardrobe. And more importantly, I didn't want to feel like other. I didn't want to feel like I was like shopping in a different part of the store. I wanted to be just as excited by the brand and the design as I was for like the problem that I was looking to solve. And so I said to myself, like, oh my God, I think I texted my sister. I was like, I'm going to start a denim brand for short girls. And like only a sister can tell you. She was like, what else are you doing? Like, what? Yeah, like you're not doing anything. You should. And so I literally got on the phone, and this is kind of how I approach every problem. It's like, who do I know that knows anything about the problem I'm trying to solve? And so like I went down the list and I talked to anyone and everyone who I could get my hands on, who had like any remote ties to the denim industry. And I'm based in Los Angeles currently, sort of, like based in a suitcase. But at the time I was in LA, and this is like the denim center of, especially in the US. So there were actually a lot of people to talk to, and everyone in my family's short, like 3/4 of my friends are short. And so I just started talking about it, and people were like, oh my God, this is so annoying. Like, you should do this. And I honestly, and I feel like I still kind of am this way sometimes. Like I was waiting for someone to tell me no, and it just never came. It was just kind of like the doors kind of kept opening, and then here we are, you know, like almost 6 months post launch. This was a year and a half ago.
It is amazing that there really is no brand serving women under 5'4".
I
I mean,
know.
it's crazy. It makes no
My
sense,
dad
actually.
said to me, it makes no sense. My dad said to me, he was like, no one's done this. Like, are you sure?
No,
And people tell me all
that
the
was my
time,
reaction, actually.
yeah, like, are you sure? And I'm like, guys, like, I'm not, like, I obviously Googled it. Like, I did my research. And so, like, yes, there are like a couple brands that do it, mostly in the mass market. Think J. Crew, Old Navy, Gap, which have their place in my wardrobe, right? As much as Nell does. And then there are some denim brands that do it, but it's like a teeny tiny assortment. And what we found now from being in the market, and we've honed in on our positioning because of this, is she's being sort of serviced in stretch and very basic styles. Where she is not being serviced whatsoever is in rigid fashion denim. And that's what she wants at the end of the day. And that's what keeps her coming back. It's actually not that kind of core basic denim. It really is that really cool wide leg, or that thing with the cuff at the bottom, or the fun hem that once she cuts it off, it's pointless, and stuff like that. And so, as you'll see, which we're launching our spring collection on April 25th, we've started to move the assortment in that direction so we can really meet her where she is and give her something that no one else is giving her.
I'd love to go back to those original phone calls you made. What were some of like your key learnings? Who did you get to talk to? And like, how did you get some of these people on the phone?
Like, a warm intro is everything and more. And so I'm trying to remember who is the first person. I was like, oh, I need to call this person. Well, I know who I called first. So I have friends that have a branding agency based out of Austin, called Track Meet, and they did all the original kind of Nell branding. And I called them first, actually. And I was like, this is what I'm thinking. It had no name at the time. This is what I'm thinking. And I come from like the direct to consumer like era. So my first instinct was, I need to raise a little bit of money to get this thing off the ground. I self-funded a good chunk of it. But like, I wanted to raise the money for the validation. Like, it wasn't like to have a bunch of money in the bank. And we've only raised $140,000, which we've basically already made back in 3 months of being in business, from angels and strategics. But I wanted to raise the money because it was like a validating thing for the business. Like, having a business that people are willing to invest in, like, it was legitimizing. You know, I feel like I'm beating a dead horse, but yeah, it was legitimizing. And so basically, in that kind of same vein of like waiting for someone to tell me no, I was like, let's make enough of a brand for a pitch deck. So initially we like made the brand around being able to make this pitch deck. Like, that was the deliverable. And I was like, if I can raise, we'll like finish out the scope and we'll like actually do it. And we actually raised enough money to get the brand off the ground. And so then, because we were raising on safes, like, we were able to kind of start building as we were raising. So I've like continuously, I still am right now, we're live, like building the plane as I fly it. And we are like this weird kind of in between of like, yes, we have a little bit of investment, but like, you know, not millions of dollars, as I said. And so we're like sort of bootstrapping, I think. Like, I think we fall more into the bootstrapped category than the VC backed category, given the sums of money. And we are really just reinvesting sales into the business and building it kind of from the ground up in that way. But yeah, so that was my first phone call. And then a friend of mine, I had a bunch of friends from like Lauder and Casper who had come from, and Bala, who had come from fashion before they kind of ended up in direct to consumer, I guess we can call it. And those people were incredibly helpful to me because they were like, oh, and this is the thing. And this is why it's important to build really strong relationships with your peers and like the people below you and the people above you. Because what happened is all these people, I was in a leadership kind of development program at Estee Lauder called the Presidential Associate Program. And none of those people still work at Lauder. But guess what? We're all in the same kind of like class. And so now 10 years later, 8 years later, whatever it is, like everyone's kind of senior wherever they are. And that's like a really magical thing that I benefited from in building Nell, because all of a sudden all my peers were decision makers. which is why I think like timing is kind of everything. And so I was able to get in touch with, oh yeah, well, this one who was, an intern with me at blah, blah, blah is actually the head buyer here, and so on and so forth. And so it was a lot of serendipitous kind of stuff like that helped get us to where we are today. I participated heavily in the favor economy.
Love that. As everyone should. That's just being smart. Timing is definitely everything, but I never thought about it in this particular like sense of it. So really interesting. Going back to raising some funding, bootstrapping, what goes into starting a denim brand, and like what are those most expensive pieces to it to like just get a product out there?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think, listen, what's really cool about a product-based business, I'll start with the positive. What's really cool about a product-based business is that you get to revenue quickly. So like you make it and then you sell it. And then that money kind of comes back in. Like with tech, it's a little harder. Like sometimes it takes years to build a product, right? And you don't get to that revenue as quickly. In our case, I mean, we just got, I don't know if you can, if I want you to put this out there, but I'll say it to you. We have amazing terms with our, basically like here, the way I can say it is like, my advice would be to negotiate amazing terms with your suppliers. So for us, we benefited from that. And we continue to benefit from that. So our supplier took a chance on us, and they're amazing. And there would be, and I'm like the first person to say this, like there would literally be no business if it wasn't for our supplier, because they let us order below minimums. They give us net 30 payment terms and all of those types of things. And they don't require a deposit. And all of those types of things allow us to bootstrap the business. Like it would be a very different scenario, and we would require a lot more capital if we had to pay deposits, if we had to pay upon receipt. So like we pay for the denim up front, but that's like quite a small expense compared to the size of the total PO. So I don't know if that answers your question too granularly, but I think if there's like one nugget there, it's really to convince someone to take a chance on you and take a chance on your business, and like give you those kind of favorable payment terms and build that relationship like on a human level. And that's like someone you're going to need in your corner, like throughout the lifetime of your brand. And I'm like super loyal as a person, and our supplier, like I'll be with him until he kicks me out the door. Like he has my business forever, and they're awesome, and they're wonderful to work with. And we produce domestically. So they're actually in our backyard. I go over there all the time. And I think all of that kind of stuff is really helpful. I think that's much more challenging, obviously, if you're producing something overseas.
Do you have any like advice for others looking to negotiate something like this or negotiate something else, like with their job, whatever it might be? But like, how did you approach convincing that supplier, if you can share high level?
Yeah, absolutely. I approach everything kind of like relationship first. So at the beginning, I was just like, I want to get to know you. And I want to, for me, like, and I'm sure this applies like a kind of across the board. Like I didn't know that much about denim. So I kind of went very humbly and was like, I need a partner to help me get this thing off the ground. And you're an expert. And so how do I learn from you? And I spent a ton of time at the factory. I had them walk me through. I had them take me to the laundry. Like I was a sponge, and I was just like, how can I kind of like catch up and learn? And so I think like approaching negotiations with like humility, and also being kind of firm on the flip side of what you have to offer them, because it's also great for them to get in on the ground floor, and it's exciting. And I think this is like very American, is like this like support for small businesses. Like you don't have this. I'm half French. You don't have this in other countries in the same way. And so I think people here, they like to support kind of the underdog and the incumbent and all of that. And so like lean into that is my advice. Come in humbly and be like, listen, like I'm really excited. I also think like enthusiasm and passion are contagious. Like I could talk about jeans for short girls all the live long day. And I think people get that from me. So I guess my advice is like, be super passionate about what you're doing, be humble. And like be excited. That excitement's contagious. And I think people are always kind of looking to help They really are. I mean, that's been my experience, at least, like, very gratefully and humbly. And I also help. Like, if anybody wants to call me and ask me for whatever it is, like, the answer is yes. I take every single call of that nature. So I guess it came back.
That's back to being in the favor economy.
Exactly.
Love that. Before we get too deep into Nelle and everything you're building there, I'd love to hear more about kind of your career story. Walk us through how you made moves from Estee Lauder to Bala to Casper and then to going out on your own.
I studied international business. I went to GW in DC. So I only wanted to go to school in a city. I grew up in New York City and like hadn't fully caught on to like nature and trees and all of that yet. That's changed since I've moved to Los Angeles. But at 18, I was like, what's grass? So I did that. My first language is French. So I've always kind of been, I went to a French school in New York. So I'd always kind of been in a multicultural environment. My parents are both like self-employed and entrepreneurs. And as I was graduating, you might need to leave this part out, but I'll tell you the story anyways.
Okay.
I accepted. So I knew I wanted, it was kind of funny that I was in DC and like everybody was going into politics and I was like trying to work in fashion. I was trying to work in fashion even at the time, and I landed in beauty, but it's like adjacent enough. And I'd actually applied to the Macy's buyers program and I'd gotten in, and true to form, and it was like November of my senior year and the job started in September and whatever. And I'd gone to Macy's, I'd done the day and I'd liked it. But at the end, they told me like, you have this job, amazing, congratulations. And it was like this buying program. But they said like, you don't get to choose the category. And I was like, oh, like I wanted to buy shoes and handbags and like, you know, whatever, clothes or beauty or something. They were like, yeah, like it might be mattresses the same way. It might be like cosmetics. And I was like, oh, no. And so I called my dad. And I was like, I got this job. And he was like, okay, so amazing. Like you're done. You did it. Like 6 months before graduation, you have a job. And I worked all through college. I worked in Bluemercury as a sales associate. I was an intern at Morgan Stanley in wealth management. Like my friend Camille always says, like, I've worked since I was 16. Like it's always kind of been my thing. And I said to my dad, like, okay, but I'm not going to take it. And I was like, come again. And I was like, no, I'm not going to take the job. Like, I don't want to sell mattresses. And it was specifically mattresses. So I turned the job down like a crazy person. And it all worked out in the end because I ended up getting into the presidential associate program at Estee Lauder, which like truly is probably like one of the biggest decisions I've ever made in my life and probably had the biggest impact on my career overall. They taught me everything I know. When I'm talking to like new grads or whatever, like 10 out of 10 for rotational programs, if it's something that you can do, apply to them, participate in them. I think it was like really pivotal for me. So I rotated throughout the business. I was at MAC Cosmetics in global retail channel. So I opened their first makeup services store and the makeup services menu that's still in every MAC store. I literally worked on at 18 years old, which makes me laugh every time I like encounter one. I was at Clinique and travel retail. And then I eventually landed on the omni-channel strategy team where I met Chidima, who's still my mentor. I literally talk to her every single day. We're dear friends. We've worked together again subsequently. And I think for my like network and also for my professional development, like she taught me how to be a person like in the professional world. She taught me how to put a deck together, how to like analyze a spreadsheet, how to like use my brain, what a personal bar was, like everything. Like I give her a lot of credit for everything. Kind of I know. And so what we did in our last so I was in that rotation for 6 months and then they hired me onto that team and I was subsequently there for another year and a half. And so what we did in that year and a half, and that team was funny because it was a group of BCG consultants that had been brought in-house to basically figure out how to bridge wholesale and e-com. So at the time, omni-channel was like this nascent like concept. Now it's like table stakes beyond obvious. Like if you went to a store with an online purchase to return it and they told you no, you would be like, excuse me, what? But at the time, like that was novel. So bear with me. This was almost like 10 years ago. And we actually built the tools that bridged wholesale and e-com. So they had a ton of data in retailers, Bloomingdale's, Saks, whatever, but they had a nascent e-com business and they didn't have any of their own customer data. So we built online appointment booking by online pickup in store, whatever. And so it functioned as a little startup kind of within this just massive company. And I worked on a couple projects there that like kind of gave me the bug. I was like, oh, okay, I get it now. Like I need to go be somewhere smaller because it was already starting to kind of feel stifling for obvious reasons. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to leave. And this was like right as direct to consumer was like, you know, ratcheting its way up. And all these brands were so sexy and exciting. And I'm not kidding. I saw a job posting on LinkedIn for, at the time it was called Experience Design Manager at Casper. And so they were actually solving the opposite problem. They had kind of maxed out on who they were able to reach online to like buy a mattress. And they were looking to open stores. And so I applied to the job in the black hole, but I figured out who, and I since have hired everyone who's done this to me. And it's happened a few times. I then went on LinkedIn, like people do this. It's not that crazy, but I went on LinkedIn, figured out who was the hiring manager and basically wrote to her and told her why I was the gal for the job. And I'm not kidding. Like 7 days later, I was like butt in a seat there. Like it was fully like done and dusted. I was hired, left my job and went over there. And that was an awesome experience. And my Casper network has been also so valuable to me. And I'm so lucky to kind of count all of them as friends. So we basically opened like over 60 stores in 1 year.
Wow. How did you like find Casper and how did you decide, oh, like this is going to be a big thing? Because obviously I'm sure there was like a lot of flashy startups at the time.
A lot.
Also,
yeah.
Hilarious that you turned down that first job for selling mattresses.
That's why I told you. So then I get this job. I call my dad. I'm like, I'm working at Casper. And he goes, you're selling mattresses? And I was like, yeah, so excited, having like kind of forgotten. Right. And he was like, remember when you turned that job down to sell mattresses? It was like karmic, like irony for me. But anyways, this was like a sexy mattress. It wasn't like an old mattress. It was fine. It was like a well-branded mattress. So that worked for me. And that was just like, my family still makes fun of me to this day. And so I was on this team. So Casper was like super kind of innovative in a lot of the ways that they did things. I was on this team called the Experience Team, which was this interesting kind of amalgamation of different functions. Ours was to basically figure out how to reinvent the mattress service experience. So we worked closely with the retail team and the wholesale team on building out these environments. And I was kind of like the ops like arm of that. So I'm not even kidding. Like the first store we opened, every single piece of inventory showed up like USPS, like one per box, as if it was going to a customer. Like that was the vibe. I'll never forget it. We were sitting in Atlanta in Lenox Mall and like in piles of like hundreds of boxes. It was truly insane. And we got it to the point where we didn't even have to go to the store openings anymore. So we had like, there was like a new store openings manager that was hired. And then like we wrote a visual merchandising playbook and we were able to get these things. We were doing more than one a week. So we like physically couldn't be there for all of them. But like we basically got it to a place where it was kind of process driven and was able to kind of run itself. And so then I ended up somehow leading go-to-market strategy because no one was overseeing the product launch process from soup to nuts, concept to launch. At the time, the product team was sitting in San Francisco. All the other kind of like front-facing teams were sitting in New York. So someone had to own that process. And it, like, I'm not even kidding. It had like over 100 kind of people working on different pieces of it. And so after 3 years at Casper, so I was there pre through post IPO. So I joined, I think it was post Series C in 2018 and left kind of after the IPO through COVID, where we had to, by the way, close all the 60 stores that we opened. Like, I'll spare you that, that whole thing. But I learned a ton about like even more about retail, more about experience. And that's where for the first time, I really understood what it took to make something. And we always joke with some of my other peers that do this, like making a physical thing is not for the faint of heart. Like 100 million things can go wrong at any point in in the cycle, even post-purchase, actually, as it turns out. So it's like this really kind of delicate and precarious process that requires like special handling that I really enjoyed. And it was kind of at the end of COVID. I guess it was 2021. And I was like, okay, I've been here for 3 years. I'm not exactly sure what I wanted to do next, kind of like a through line of my career. I knew I always wanted to start something of my own, but I hadn't had that idea moment yet. Which I then kind of subsequently learned that you have to like not be doing anything in order to have the space for that idea to come. But I've not yet had the opportunity to do nothing. Like, I'm not even kidding. Between jobs, I never even like took a break, not even a week off. It was like end one Friday, start one Monday. So I'd never kind of had that time of like, just a little bit of emptiness to think. And I had said, it was kind of the end of COVID. Everything was weird. The world was weird. New York was weird. And I was like spending time in Los Angeles because it's sunny here. Literally. Like, that's what it was. I was like, it's sunny here. I have a few friends here. It's warm. That sounds lovely. And I said, okay, I'm going to look for a new job and like let the best man win. If it's in New York, great, I'll stay. If it's in LA, I'll pick up and move. I guess now that I'm telling these stories, I do this a lot. Like, I kind of like let the universe decide. But that's genuinely what I did. Girl. So I was like networking. Yeah. I mean, listen, it hasn't failed me yet, knock on wood. So I was like talking to recruiters and interviewing and like really like not really excited by anything I was finding. And then a recruiter reached out to me and she was like, we have this opportunity. And it was at this company called, I don't know if they still exist, they must, called Alice's Table, which was kind of like QVC meets Masterclass. And it was in Mark Cuban's portfolio of companies. And I interviewed there and it was like a super kind of like finance heavy ops position. And I told her like, this sounds lovely, but like, I don't think I'm your gal. And she was like, actually, like Max, the founder of Bala, is going to call you. I was like, okay, like for what? Like, I didn't know. And we spoke and we really got along and they basically let me design my own job. And so I wrote my own job description. We kind of landed on the title of chief of staff. And 6 weeks later, I moved to Los Angeles. Like, it was super exciting. It was a super exciting time for their business. They had just kind of come off of a pandemic like rush. They'd been on Shark Tank and it was really blowing up and they were looking to professionalize the team. And I was kind of like a jack of all trades. So I came in and I did all sorts of things, managed their products, like product development cycle, worked with all of their suppliers. I opened their first pop-up in New York because like my career's not been linear whatsoever. So I do have like, I'm a jack of all trades master. I feel like what I like to say now is like, I'm like a really good orchestra conductor. And I'm really good at like finding experts and giving them the space to do their thing. But I can kind of hold the whole thing together. And I think that's kind of how I've ended up here as a founder and why and how I've built my own business is really based on that notion of like letting people do their thing, hiring experts fractionally or whatever, however you want to do it, and just kind of like being the glue. And so that's kind of what I did at Bala. And I feel like this was like a very long-winded answer, but I feel like it's kind of
I loved it. I literally loved it. From working at Casper and Bala, were there any like key takeaways, lessons of like, oh, I should like make sure I don't do this as a founder entrepreneur? Because I feel like working at startups, like that's where you learn those things, which I find is so important to do before starting your own business.
Yes, totally. I think like I feel grateful every single day that I'm like 10 years into my career when I'm doing this, because it would be really, really scary for me if I wasn't. Yeah, I think what I learned is like through and through, I'm not like a creative. I am creative in certain ways, but I'm really a tried and true operator. And so what Lily always says to me, she's like, you know the levers and you know when to pull them. And I feel like that is kind of like my special sauce. Like I'm very careful and cautious about certain things just because I've experienced it through others. So I'm very conservative around inventory, for instance. I would rather be sold out any day than be overstocked. And like, that's something that they try to all kind of push me like, oh, maybe 50 more. And I'm like, nope. Like absolutely not. And we produce domestic, like I have PTSD. Like, it's like, for me, it's like, it's not a risk I'm willing to take. We're selling jeans. Like, people can wait 3 weeks. It's not that big of a deal. And I don't really think the demand, like the funnel it's not that fast, in our case specifically, we're selling premium denim. Like, and listen, we put a pre-order on for our hero product and I've sold through 25% of the inventory that I ordered. So like, people are okay to pre-order. They're okay to wait a few weeks for something. I think, like, with all the shipping delays. So whatever, I'm super conservative about inventory. That's something that I really learned. I also have not run a paid ad. I'm very sensitive to CAC and basically trying to grow organically until a certain point. And then, like, we will eventually run ads. Like, I'm not saying like never run a paid ad, but I think my experiences have showed me like what that can look like. And I think overall, and this isn't just because of my experiences in the startups that I've worked in, I think this is also just the direction the market's gone in. There's been a shift from growth at all costs to profitability. And I'm sure you hear this 100 times a day, and that's the truth. And at the end of the day, I think I want to build a business personally, and everybody kind of wants to do these things differently, and all of it's really okay. For me personally, I want to build a brand and a business that's like intergenerational and that can stand the test of time. And in order to do that, and I've like read the J. Crew book, and I look at brands like that, like J. Crew and The Gap, who have been through like 100 iterations of themselves. And I think what I realized is like, oh, you're all going to go through, and we will too, go through phases of being like hot and trendy and cool. And then we will not be hot and trendy and cool. And then we will be hot, trendy, and cool again. And that's kind of what you see with these brands that are like so long standing and have been worn by my grandmother the same way they'll be worn by my children, is that they've been able to survive the lulls. And how do you survive the lulls? You have to build your business. Like, the math has to math. And so that's why, like, for me, coming out of where I've come from, it's important to just do things conservatively and to grow slowly and steadily and profitably. So I think that would be like the biggest kind of lesson.
I love how you're thinking about all of those things. And when you talk about inventory, my head immediately goes to Peloton. And the disastrous inventory overbuying they did and how horrible that was. And then to your point of marketing and not spending on like influencer marketing, let's bring it back to Nelle and how like you got your supplier, you had your branding, so then you had your first product. How did you market it? How did you sell your first pair of jeans?
Initially, I was like, I had made a financial model with paid ads, like full transparently. Like, that was kind of what my model was based on initially. And then all this stuff with direct to consumer was happening. And I was like, oh, no, we need to pivot this. And so we actually did pre-launch events. Just honestly, the truth of the reason why I did them was because I was so scared to buy this inventory without anyone other than me having put on these jeans before, that I was like, I just need to get bodies in a room and butts in jeans just to make sure like this stuff doesn't look crazy. Like, that's really what it was. But it turned into this, like, these like pop-ups. And then again, a situation where we leveraged pre-order, that if people liked them, they could order them. And at that point, it was still like my network and like one circle out from my network. So, if there was a problem, I could call them. And like, we did get randoms that came in and ordered jeans. And I'm ever so grateful to like the first person who bought jeans for me that I didn't know personally. But that's how we started. And so then I was like, okay, so these events work. Also, like, people need to try on jeans. It's the second hardest category to fit after swim. So like, it's better in person. In one day, I hope we'll have a store. But right now we're doing these pop-ups. And then the second piece of the strategy was good old PR. I think for me, like, having come from these like amazing brands, like, the legitimacy was important to me. Like, I wanted it to feel like a real business. I didn't want it to feel like, oh, this is like her little passion project that she's doing in her corner. I was very serious about it, and I am very serious about it. So I brought on PR, and that was kind of like my big gamble. I was like, this is marketing. This is what we're doing. We're going to put a chunk of money into this, and we're going to see what happens. And, we launched with an exclusive in Vogue.
Amazing. How did you get the exclusive in Vogue? Tell me more.
Yeah, I mean, my PR team kind of reached out, and the shopping editor from Glamour had just left and joined Vogue, and she happened to be short. she picked it up. She wanted to write the story.
I love that.
It resonated with her.
Yeah.
It immediately resonated with her, and she was like, this is so cool, and I want to write about it. And so she did, and we did the interview, and we talk like often, and we have a relationship with her, and she's awesome. But she did, she changed the course of my business. We were in Vogue twice on launch day.
Can you share maybe either not revenue numbers, but like what was the impact?
We still sell jeans from that article. So there were 2 articles. One was affiliate linked, one wasn't. But we had a pretty big launch day revenue wise because of that article. Like we were on the homepage of Vogue.com. Like it was crazy. It was surreal for me. And it was such a moment. And then like what happens when a story like that comes out is that all these other outlets pick it up. And so then it was kind of this like mushroom effect. And, I placed a PO. We had about 700 units and we sold out about a third of it in the first 2 weeks because of all that press. And then we had done a bunch of gifting. We did a pop-up in New York City, a breakfast for press and influencer, and then a consumer pop-up. And at that point, like, I'm not even kidding. Like we had 300 followers on Instagram. Like, we weren't like, sure, we were posting things, but no one was looking at them. And after that from the press, and then we really started to get into the gifting. So because the press, like, here's the thing, it's like this whole ecosystem that works together, right? Because when you write to the influencer and you're like, hi, I'm like Mr. Nobody brand. Do you want my stuff? They're getting so much inbound. They don't care. But when you write to them saying, hey, I'm this new brand, we were actually featured in Vogue last month, which is exactly what we did. Everyone's like, oh, this is awesome. I love this. Cool. It's almost like these publications have global brands. And how can you leverage those brands to buoy your brand? And that's kind of what we did. And so we used that in our outreach to influencers. And then we kind of fell into this niche of influencers on TikTok because the longer form content lends itself really nicely to explaining the value proposition of the brand. And then Substack. And Substack, like my money's on Substack.
Interesting. So what are you doing on Substack? Tell me more.
We're starting a Substack. It's going to start we're going to start in May. But we've worked with a bunch of Substack influencers, and the level of engagement with the content on Substack is different than on other platforms because users pay for access to that content. So all of a sudden they're much more engaged, and the conversion we see when a Substacker posts about us, it's next level. But they've also taken the time to like write a whole blurb or whatever it is, style guide. There's 100 different ways when it comes to Nelle Atelier. We see like a huge lift, and it's super, super exciting. And when it comes to our own Substack and what we're going to write about, I actually asked the community, it's like, do you even want to hear from me? Like, honestly, there's so much it's like content overload, like, do we need to add another thing? And they were super excited. I was like, okay, here we go. And they want petite style advice. And so that's what we're going to give them.
Love that niche. Like that's something that's not being addressed.
It's not being addressed. And so we're going to provide that. And I'm super excited to, kind of uplift other creators and other different businesses. Like there's a lot of cool stuff that we can do through that channel, to uplift other kind of female entrepreneurs and other influencers and other creators, and also give them a platform and a place to kind of like a spotlight. And so I think we're going to leverage the Substack to do that.
Wait, I'm so excited for this. I love this. Before we run out of time, I want to hear kind of about your fundraising process. How did you tackle that? What have been some of your biggest learnings and takeaways for other founders that might be going through this?
Absolutely. I mean, listen, fundraising is really hard. This market's kind of a bummer. It's a really big bummer in consumer. I think like the direct to consumer bubbles burst. And I'm not myself, like I'm not convinced that VC is the best fit for direct-to-consumer businesses or product-based businesses. I think some of them, yes. I think it's very helpful later stage, but we're pre-seed. So we've had to kind of find the side door I guess is what I would say. Like the front door was not available to us. So it's been a lot of angels and strategics. And I love every single one of our investors. They're all amazing. It's a lot of people I've worked for or with. And I think that's something that you shouldn't like discount as a founder is like, it's kind of, I was very kind of hesitant to do friends and family because I just like didn't feel super comfortable. But actually, like your professional network is a really interesting place to look for people like that because every single person on our cap table is a brand person and a product person, so they understand one what they're getting themselves into, two they can provide strategic kind of guidance, and three they like get what you're doing and they can be really really helpful. So I think like friends, family, old coworkers. Is a really good place to start if you're in like this kind of weird space like I am where there is no really institutional funding for what you're doing. Aside from that, I haven't really like applied to any grants. We've been really just kind of reinvesting sales and growing the business and doing so profitably. So that's my advice. I wish I had more to share. If anyone has any advice for me, I'd gladly take it.
I think it's always very helpful hearing every founder's different perspectives because I think it looks so different. The fundraising process looks so different for every founder. And so just hearing any of your insights and takeaways is incredibly helpful, I think.
It's a lot of grit, I will say. It's like a lot of banging down every door you can find.
Yeah. Just getting your foot in the door and getting someone on the phone.
Exactly. Really. And I do feel like once we get to talk to them, like they never thought they cared about this problem and like they leave the call and they care. But yeah, getting that phone call and that FaceTime with the person it's hard.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it, and your story is so powerful of like telling like your experience and like why you are the right person to build this. You can't share that over an email or in a pitch deck. And so just getting a call is like so important.
Totally.
And as we start to wrap things up, can you share a female founder, investor, or leader who inspires you and a bit about why?
I think about Bobbi Brown a lot. She's done it twice. And I think that's probably like, that's what I hope to do. I think that's really cool and really inspirational. Like Bobbi Brown is an amazing success. And so is Jones Road and watching the evolution from one to the next. And she's also a fellow shorty. So I'm a fan.
Wait, we need to get her some Nelle jeans, some Nelle denim.
She's on the list.
Amazing. I love that. Awesome. And finally, where can people find you and where can they order and try out Nelle Atelier?
So we're on TikTok and Instagram at Nelle Atelier, NelleAtelier. We're going to put the phonetics on there and we need to do that because everybody is confused by the pronunciation. And then you can find me at MadCoXO and you can shop the brand at NelleAtelier.com.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Madeleine, for being here. Again, long time coming, and it was just fun to chat and get to learn even more about you and your story.
Totally. Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.